Welcome to our weekly Friday Talk and Tour series when we share the opportunity to visit the studios of our wonderful artists and hear about their works and inspiration. These visits are brought to you by the Duncan McClellan Gallery and the DMG School Project of St. Petersburg, Florida. Thank you for joining us.
I'm going to tell you now a little bit about my history, how I got started. Here is my very first display when I was doing shows back in 1980 or 79. It was, this is how we did it back then. I mean, people didn't have the tents or electricity, we just set up our work on bricks and boards, and there was no credit cards back then, right? Everything was cash, and there was no bins and bubble wrap, right? We used wax chicken boxes and newspaper to wrap up our work in. And this is the work that I was doing when I first came out of college. And just you can see I'm experimenting with a lot of different shapes and taking them out and selling them at the art shows. You can see the porcelain, salt-fired porcelain, high-fired porcelain raku. Okay, and so here is the sort of thing I was making. This is a Celadon tea set. This was my own design. I was passionate about the porcelain at that point. I mean, always have been. And to me, pursuing my own designs was the most important thing. So we had this teapot, and we can go on to the next shot. And here's a bottle, salt glazed porcelain bottle. And the next shot shows another salt glazed porcelain piece. I'm experimenting with the surface, right? The glaze of the surface. The next slide shows how I'm experimenting, trying to alter that porcelain while it's still wet and get different forms out of it other than just what was the wheel presented. Now you can see on that back one that didn't understand the technique of how to make the alterations yet, but I was attempting to do that. All right, sorry. And this is another teapot design with a rutile glaze, still back in like 1981, 83, around in that time. Going out and doing a show basically every weekend during the season, make the work in my studio during the week and go out and sell the work on the weekends at various shows like Coconut Grove and Gasparilla and Winter Park. Those bring back memories, huh, Duncan?
It sure does.
Yeah, and so in copper red glazes, I was doing this for a number of years. We were in Florida for about 5 years. We had one child, and then we had a second child. And at the time I had 2 kids in diapers, I was like kind of going a little crazy doing all these shows and being a young mother at that time. I kind of thought, if I don't back down off this, I'm going to lose it. So I did cancel out of all the shows for about 11 months and came back with new work. I was listening to all the people at the shows saying, no, I'd buy your pieces, but the bases are so narrow that my cats are going to knock them over. And, I buy the pieces except for my living room's blue. Don't you have any blue pots? And so I came back, I'm going to make these space pots. I love them. They've got these big, thick bases, and they're going to be blue, and they're just going to fly off the shelves. Everybody's going to buy them. Well, you know what happened. Nobody bought them. Even the judges, I stopped winning awards. The judges didn't like them either. It's like just this complete zero. And I thought, well, that's what I get for listening to other people. I need to listen to my heart and my own direction. It was a good lesson to learn at that early age. I sort of just backed off and said, okay, I'm going to go back to the forms that I was doing, and you can show them that I just, the next image will show you that I just took a step back, took a breath back, and continued to concentrate on that pure form that I was working with. At that time, it was that wheel thrown form, just as pure as I could possibly make it, but really concentrating on the form. Continued, growing the porcelain shapes, and I still was meticulous about my glazes, but I honestly liked the work better. You can show the next couple of shots too. Yeah, that here's like the pink glazes, and as much as I love these glazes that I'd worked so hard to develop my own glazes, I like the pieces even better before they were glazed. And I said, let me try this then. So I stopped glazing the porcelain. Now, porcelain is non-porous. Unlike other clays, it is a completely non-porous clay. It's translucent where it's thin, very tactile and soft. When I sanded it very smooth, so I was getting beautiful surface that was matte with a lot. Just showed a lot of light and showed shadows, very nuanced shadows. I said, this is where I can explore my pure form. So that's where it started. This is about, you can show the next one. This is about 1987, 88, around in there, or maybe 89, I don't know. But you can see that they were still really very much the wheel thrown form, but I was now completely on focus of the form only. So I continued to progress. This is about 1997, and you can sort of see how the forms are opening up and becoming more and more cut. Still just the form. Now, this is 2004. It continued to progress. We have moved back to Massachusetts after about 15 years in Florida. My family is from here, so we moved back to family, and I continued to do some art shows in Florida. This show was the first American Craft Council show I did. And I learned a lot by doing the American Craft Council shows. They had seminars on marketing and that sort of thing. So I'm going to show you a progression of the displays as I went through. This would be the next year or so. And then next is the following. They've talked about try and make it look like new and bright every year. And it's like, this work is just really technically difficult. It can't change that fast. So I put different backgrounds down. So I continued. And then as you can see here, I finally said, well, they may say that's how you market, but honestly, my work is about light and shadow. I'm just going to even make my displays about light and shadow. So this here is about 2009 maybe or so. And I pretty much by that point understood my focus, and the work, I just kept opening it up and making it more and more airy. The people who thought that it was too fragile before, hey, they ain't seen nothing yet. I could just make it more and more like light and airy. Porcelain is a really, really hard material. It's one of the hardest materials that man has. So, it is strong. That's why I can work with it and make it look so lacy and still have it strong enough to hold up, shipping and all of that. But the look of the fragility and the look of the delicacy is what I'm after work. This is about 2014. So that's basically the history. Okay, that's done.
And this is also, I'm going to point out, if you don't mind, Jennifer, that
yeah.
This is where your gilding starts.
That's right. Thank you, Mary.
Sure.
And around 2011 was actually when we first experimented with this, but my husband, Tom, is a very good gilder. He is an old school sign painter, a real master with his brush and lettering brush, and he can paint many fonts freehand. And so this was a skill, that's his profession. And this is a skill that he developed over years and years. So we decided to collaborate and put our two hard-won skills together, do some work of gilding the interiors of some of these pieces. Now, porcelain is really, it absorbs light and it's really translucent, whereas then gold is the most highly reflective thing. You know, they use it for light domes and cathedrals, and you know, historically, it's just really reflective. It's so those are two contrasting ideas about light and shadow that I'm sort of playing off each other in my work. Now, this is to the present. This is our house where we live in Massachusetts. This is on Martha's Vineyard, and I just took it. We had a big storm a couple weeks ago, like clocked 95-mile-an-hour winds, and half the island was out of electricity, and everybody had trees. But we had this tree fall down on our house. It's sort of a mess. You can see there's the tree. We still haven't cleaned it up completely, but you know, the house is pretty good. It's okay, pretty much undamaged. So here, I'm going to show you my studio, but first, this is the view out the back of our house. We live on a lagoon that is a saltwater, sort of a salt tidal pond, sort of area of critical concern where we have a lot of like ospreys, different birds and hawks and deer. These are steps going down to my studio. They're made out of stone. My brother made these for us when we first built the house about 26, 27 years ago. And this is the entrance to my studio. It is underneath our house. Here is the beautiful entrance, flanked by two beautiful trash cans. Really an entrance that I use that much, but it's got a nice yard if I want to do some glazing outside. Too much, but I come in, there are the inside stairs. Here's my wheels, and this is where I work all the time. I'm down here. This is where I live, in that dilapidated old chair, basically. Space here is my clay mixer. It's become my best friend. It mixes and de-airs my clay. I used to have to wedge it all by hand, and I was like wearing my hands out until I bought this. After 30 years of wedging by hand, I don't know why I didn't do it sooner, but it's been a great machine for me. Then we keep going. This table, I do packing and stuff on it, and here are my kilns. I've got, I fire and electric kilns up to cone 10, 2,350 degrees Fahrenheit. And this you can see this is a 10 cubic foot electric kiln. I've got two of those and one 6 cubic foot, a sink.
Jennifer, have you always used electric?
No. Early on, it was gas. Those red pots that you saw in Celadons, they require fire for the reduction firing. But once I switched to, was not using any glazes, it was better to use the electric. For one thing, it's a lot more environmentally friendly. And for another thing, it's just, you know, all I really need is heat. And then So I have a photographer that I love and takes all of my good photography, my images, but there's often that I have to shoot pieces quickly myself. And so I do have a little photography studio down here as well. See, I just roll it up when I don't need it. And I can shoot the images. So it is, you can see it's a small little studio, but it's everything that I need there. And I'm very happy there. It's cozy. Uh, that's it. That's the studio.
So that's the room where it happens, right?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
where I've spent all of my life.
Well, we're so glad, for us, of course, that you're able to make magic here.
I do. I love it. I sometimes I feel like a little troll down, in the dungeon, but a happy troll. I
I
think
think,
we're going
go ahead.
you're going to show us some
Yeah,
video now.
oops,
The
no,
other next
that's the
video.
next one. So the
Yeah.
next video, okay.
Yeah, and so this is me in that. You saw me in that. I told you I was always in that chair. Here I am. I'm still in that chair. And I'm throwing, I'm going to go through all the steps, like little bits of all the steps. The first step is throwing the pot on the potter's wheel, the porcelain. So I center the clay and then punch down the hole in the middle. It's kind of fast forward every time, I'm only showing you little bits of it because it takes longer to do this. Then I pull up the wall of the porcelain. It's called pulling up the cylinder. You see, I'm using water and I'm pulling up that clay as I have been doing on the potter's wheel ever since I was 15. Is when I started work on the potter's wheel. So it's something that has been with me. Once I get the cylinder pulled all the way up, then I'm going to sort of pull this cylinder into a spherical shape. I'm pressing the clay. I was using water before you need it, but now I'm not using any water. I'm using two ribs, one on the inside and one on the outside, called dry throwing technique that allows me to have a stronger, stiffer form. A little bit of stop action there, but you can see that inside metal rib. Can you see how that's sort of pushing against that? It's like a skin thin porcelain form at this point, and it needs to be really thin for it to move in the firing the way that I want it to move. So I'm throwing a very thin shell of a spherical form to create my piece with, to start creating my piece with. Once I'm happy with the form, I take it off the wheel, and then by hand, while that porcelain is still wet, I'm altering the form. I alter the form to set up lines, to set up soft shadows, to set up a sort of sense of corrugation within the piece, a rippling, which actually structurally makes the piece stronger.
Oops.
Oops.
Sorry. Okay, I'm going to get that back.
Put it. Ooh, that was quick. Whee!
Okay.
Altering the piece. We get to see this twice. I hope you guys can stand it.
I could watch it for a long time. It's beautiful.
Yeah. Go. You have to do this sort of evenly. You saw that early picture that I showed you. I didn't know how the technique was to alter a piece without crimping it all up. Well, here's how you do it. That's how you should do it. It would have been nice if I'd had somebody to teach me, but we make these things up sort of as we go along through all the years, and I I've said sometimes when I'm teaching a workshop, boy, I sure wish I'd been able to take my own workshop 30 years ago. You know, all the techniques that one develops over the course of a lifetime. So it dries. It depends on how much. This piece is now leather hard. Okay, so now I am carving this away. You know, it's dried maybe a day, but I have to monitor the drying to get it just right. And so now I'm carving this halfway between wet and dry piece called leather hard with an X-Acto blade. Here's another step of the carving. I only have between 1 and 3 hours to do all of the carving before the piece becomes too dry as the water evaporates out. So I have to work super fast to get through all of the carving. Oops.
Jennifer, do you draw that out prior to your cutting? Do you draw the pattern?
I do not draw the pattern out prior to cutting. I will make a few, like I call them longitude or latitude lines, but I don't do that because I don't have enough time. The clay would just dry too fast. You know, you have to work with it much faster than that. I think it's, there. Oh, you stopped that. Clever girl. It's like, oh, see, it doesn't have to be quick. We can just stop it. Wouldn't that be nice? You see, I've carved only the top part that I'm showing you. After I get this top bit, I continue down to the bottom. It sort of dries first on the top. Once I get the whole piece carved, though, then I set it aside and let it get completely dry. And when it's bone dry, then I start sanding. Here is the sanding. You see how it's all carved out, and all the physical water is evaporated out of this clay. There's the sanding parts, dry sanding, wet sanding. It's complicated and also just very, very time consuming. Piece will take days to sand. That's where so much of the time is. I work on it a while, and if I feel like it's getting too weak, I'll set it aside and come back at it again the next day. The last thing I do after everything else is sanded is I cut that piece, these arms of this particular design free, and I'm using a Dremel tool with a diamond pointed spike on it, you know, like drill that they use in the dentist to drill they're actually dental things. Okay, you might want to stop it at this moment, actually. See, because what the step that you didn't see in there, because there's nothing to see, is that I went ahead when I finished that piece and I fired it once up to only 1825 degrees, 100 degrees Fahrenheit. That is hot enough to drive the chemical water out of the clay, but not hot enough to change it molecularly. And I fire it that way, right side up, so that it becomes stronger. The piece is incredibly delicate before that firing. And I could not manipulate it without the bisque firing. Now, this piece that you see me working with now, it has been fired, low fired, and now I am preparing it to go into the high fire. So now we can run it. So put a little pad of fiber, ceramic fiber down, then I grab a kiln post. This is a refractory kiln post that one uses in a kiln, and carefully turn that piece upside down just like so that when it becomes malleable in that white hot heat, that piece is going to slump. Gravity is going to take that piece and change the form. Carefully balance it. Okay, and here it is after the fire, and it's cooled down, and I can pull it back out. Look how much that piece has changed. Carefully take the post out. abracadabra, there is the piece, finished piece. You
Wow.
have that piece in your
Yes.
gallery. Yes, it's a beautiful piece. I was very proud of it. That's the problem.
So Jennifer, do you know how it's going to finally be shaped when you put that in? Do you know
No,
how?
it's a lot of calculations and hours and iterations. There's successes and failures, and every time that I have a success and a piece comes out great, I go, yay, And every time I have a failure or the piece didn't come out of the kiln the way I'd hoped it would, I look at it and I learn from it, you see? So, that can be a hard way to learn, but when you're doing a process that nobody else has invented, that nobody else knows about, you kind of have to, because there's nobody to teach you, right? I mean, I know, Duncan, you've been through this in your own work, right? You forge your path, and you have to teach yourself by doing
More
it.
artists learn from their mistakes, and that's what leads them on to be the thing that they're known for.
Yep. We just have persevere. We have a vision. Now, if this doesn't work, then we try this. And if that doesn't work, we try something else. And, when something's great, it's like all comes together, but it's what makes life exciting, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
It's like every time I open a kiln, it's like Christmas or.
It's always a surprise.
Yeah.
You were saying, Jennifer, you don't really know until you open the kiln what's going to happen when you open that lid.
Yeah. I don't have any more control over it after I fire it. And in glass, you kind of can see what you're doing, and it's like really wild, but like maybe you have a little control. I don't know. You're actively working with that molten piece. Me, I put it in the kiln, and it's like, oh, I wish you were a child. I won't see it again until it's cooled down and I open that kiln back up.
And how long does the firing and the cooling take?
Well, my kilns work, it's about 24 hours.
Okay.
But the whole process of that firing, the kilns that I have.
In the next slide, I believe we're going to see your newest body of work, correct?
Yes, Duncan
Right,
glass collection.
Okay.
There it is.
So
Very pleased with this body of work.
I just want to say before we start that my first impression when I saw these images, which will be coming to the gallery December 10th, are that as sculptures themselves, each piece, if you put aside the fact that they're porcelain or glass or anything else, just in the sculptural, in the realm of artistic sculpture, they are perfect. So I just want to say that that's such an incredible thing.
Thank you.
Sure.
Well, I'm working on getting a flow with the pieces. I want the curves and everything to follow each other. I want a sense of movement. In this piece called Gilded Vortex Vessel, you see that I have a swirling around of two parts, kind of like a yin and yang, that I am trying to create a visual movement as that yin and yang sort of swirl around each other. And the lines have a flow to create movement with that piece in a graceful way. This piece called Gilded Coral Vessel, and these two pieces, they're gilded with 24 karat gold leaf on the inside by Tom. It is more delicate looking and more open. It reminds me of coral. I'm looking to see the inside and the outside of this piece at the same time, because it's nice and open that way. This piece, Wind Vessel, it it is bare porcelain, no gilding, and you see how translucent that piece is. You see the light and shadow coming through. That is the beauty of this, the bare porcelain. It's very translucent. This piece is quite asymmetrical. It has a different sort of movement. I like to call it balanced asymmetricality.
Beautiful.
And this next piece here, gilded fire vessel. It has 3 licks of flame coming up, if you will, again, circling each other and trying to have a repeating form that moves around each other, and you see openings in the body of the work to sort of let the light out of the reflective gilding out of that piece. This is my newest design. I worked on this through much of the COVID lockdown, iterations of this design till I got it right, how I wanted. It's called Smoke Vessel. You see the sort of swirly smoke that I see it evoking, all the loops and balanced asymmetricality. And last but not least, we have Torch Vessel, or the 6 sort of flaming arms up with symmetrical and not symmetrical to create movement. Yeah.
Beautiful. And so how long would it take you to create this body of work? I mean, not,
Oh
we
my
know,
goodness.
I know.
You know, my process is it takes me about a month from start to finish for a piece. You know, I have all those steps that you saw. I just, you know, and it can't be rushed. Also, I don't know how you count time.
I know.
I ask that question, and sometimes I'll say a month and 40 years. It took a month and 40 years to make that piece.
Exactly. We're just going to run through some stills of each of these pieces, so you can get, you know, can really absorb them as you look at them. And a catalog to these pieces, I believe, is in the chat also.
Cool.
The Gilded Fire Vessel. And again, just absorbing the sculptural aspects of these pieces is, you could sit and just kind of meditate on them.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about the process and everything through this this video chat, which is really fun. When it gets right down to it, I mean, most of the people that admire and collect the work, they don't even care how it's made. In a sense, it's like, this is the work.
This is beautiful.
Created an entity in and of itself.
Mm-hmm.
Or to live, you know, to live in their homes and to create a sense of movement and grace that, you know, to pick up the atmosphere of the room.
And the light and shadow, as you said, which you were talking about before.
Yeah, it changes from light, whether the light is in the morning or the evening, or if you're standing on one side or the other, as sculpture changes. Yeah.
And again, Jennifer will be with us Friday, December 10th from 5 to 7. And contact us at the gallery if you'd like to come and ask any questions. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And folks, you can unmute yourselves and speak with Jennifer. Let's see if I can get her back.
I saw some questions. Thank you. Patty.
Oh, good.
I saw a couple questions, but I couldn't focus on them.
Sure. One question is, how many days does it have to dry before you shape it? So to get to,
Well, after I throw the form and alter it, it really depends on how dry the atmosphere is, but I have to monitor it from then on. And I can put it in a plastic bag and arrest the drying. And I
mhm.
do that to help it dry evenly. Then I take it out of the bag and put it back in and cover parts of it with a bag and just sort of watch it. And usually in about 4 or 5 days, I feel like I have it right. But if I just let it sit out overnight, it would be too dry to work on in the morning. I have to control dry the pieces for evenness.
And Susan asked, was it an experiment to determine the exact temperature for the first fire?
Oh,
How did-
good question. That is a very good question. And the answer is no, because porcelain, it is calculated to be fired at a particular temperature. Most porcelain is high fire, and this porcelain, it is formulated to fire between a range of cone 9 and cone 11. I fire at cone 10, 2,350 degrees Fahrenheit, and I cannot fire it lower or I won't have the translucent and buttery, soft, smooth surface of porcelain. And I can't fire hotter because then it does start to break down and becomes too brittle. So I have to work within the specified parameter of my porcelain formula.
And someone else asked, how did you fire the wind vortex piece, which appears to slump back inward on towards the south?
The wind piece. Yep, that's exactly right. That piece was not fired balanced upside down, but it was fired in kind of a support so that I tipped it like 5 degrees this way, 10 degrees this way, and allowed it to slump in that so that gravity, clearly is working in that downward direction.
Let's see.
When is the gilding put into your piece?
Yeah, the gilding, that's the very last thing. It's the very last thing that happens. And so after the firing, where the piece is complete, I've got several hours of sanding to do that as if you were a glass person, you'd call it cold work. I have several hours of cold work to do on that piece before it's finished, whether it's gilded or not. And that, I use diamond sanding pads to really smooth and polish it, get off all of the, what's called.
Oops.
Hello?
Hi, can anyone hear?
Yes, we can now.
Okay, great. Thanks. Okay.
Jen got muted.
Oh, Jen. Okay. We have comments that, people have been a fan of yours forever, Jennifer. First saw your work at a Baltimore arts and crafts show and loving to see the process.
Yeah, thanks. It's great. It's great to be with you all.
Does anyone else have?
Jen, this is Mark Handel of Market Bill. And it's interesting. We're in California now, but it's in fact when you discovered cutting your pieces, opening them up, and so they in fact didn't look like anybody else's porcelain work, that we then started to acquire your work.
I think you might have that first piece, don't you?
We have We
that
have an
I
early
turned
cut
upside
piece. We have the first or possibly the second upside down piece. I think we have this,
I
I think we have the
remember that
second
piece
upside
very
down
well. It was quite traumatic at the time because it was like, you know, I was trying to correct something that had gone amiss having to do with a storm and the electric outing, and I just didn't know where it was in the firing. And
Right, but
I mean,
even the earliest cut pieces you did, because we have one of the early ones of those
yeah,
too.
you do. That's right. I remember that.
But that's at the point of where your work had a voice that doesn't look like anybody else's. When you were showing some of the early work you did of, I won't call them simple, but you're still your glazed
Yeah,
work of things on
right.
the wheel, we can compare those to some other potters that we both know.
That's true. And the thing about it is that I was just as passionate about that work then. And I believe that maybe some people can find their voices right away, but for me, I mean, it was so long to develop that much skill to be able to throw that in that well, and you know, that easily, to before I would be able to cut the work. I mean, how many years and thousands of hours at the wheel just trying to make that perfect form. And so in your mind, when you get the perfect form, the last thing you want to do is dent it or alter it. It's like, I don't want to dent it. No.
But that was the jump.
That is the jump. But you know, you have to reach a certain level of mastery before you can make that jump, I think. Yeah. Thank you.
We have another question from Alan. First of all, commenting how beautiful the work is. And he has a large black piece. And where does the black come from?
Oh, well, the black pieces are actually made out of, those large pieces are made out of terracotta clay. It's not a porcelain. And for the big floor vases, I need to use some, if I'm making those, I need to use a clay that is suitable to not warp, okay? Because there's too much gravity there and they would just slump into not a pretty piece if I was to use porcelain. So that piece that he's talking about, it's a beautiful piece, Alan, out of terracotta clay, and it's got a saturated metallic glaze is what makes it black. A lot of oxides in it. It's a combination of iron, cobalt, manganese, and copper oxides in a glaze that make it kind of look sort of metallic almost. It was like I used it for quite a while as a counterpoint, like a contrast to the porcelain. For a number of years, really, I still will throw some large pieces, but I really feel like my focus is, I'm pretty much with the porcelain these days.
I love it.
Thank you. Thank you. It's good to see you.
Let's see, Ed and Shelley Grossman.
Hi, Ed and Shelley.
Been fans for years, and the elegance reflects the artist. So
Oh, thank
nice
you.
compliment.
I've missed seeing you guys. I've missed seeing so many people. Oh, guess we've all been in this sort of boat. Please, anybody who can come to Florida and see me December 10th, that would be fun. Duncan McClellan Glass.
Well, thank you so much, Jennifer. And
Thank you, Mary.
thank you
It's so much
all for
fun.
joining us. Really special afternoon session. And thanks for taking the time.
Yes, thank you for coming.
Sure, Duncan?
Thank you very much, Jen. I really appreciate you doing this. We're excited about seeing you again. We love the annual visits.
I love it.
And can't wait to get the new work in the gallery. So
Yeah,
thank you
Tom
very
and I
much.
look forward to that big time.
And say hi to Tom for us.
Okay, I will.
Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful weekend. The recording will be posted on our YouTube by next week. We have a YouTube channel, the Duncan McClellan Gallery. So if you didn't catch the whole session, you can catch us there.